Tonight we are on lesson number 11 out of 13 lessons Mark and I are teaching, Sowing the Life of Your Dreams, the Life of a Seed. And tonight, what we're doing through this series is looking at principles that are taught in the Bible as far as our spiritual growth is concerned, our spiritual maturity, but also making application to our secular lives, because the principles that make us successful Christians are also going to make us successful in our secular lives, because God is the one who designed it all, right? If He's the Lord of our spiritual lives, He's also the Lord of our employment lives. So tonight we're looking at sowing the seeds for successful relationships. Can you be a success? Marvin, could you have been a success where you worked if you didn't have good relationships with people around you? Not a chance. So even in a secular job, you still got to build good relationships. So it doesn't matter where you are. We've got to build good relationships. So improving our relationships one seed at a time, because we're talking about planting seeds, right? Mark chapter 4, the parable of the sower. So how do we improve relationships? How do we develop relationships? Communication. We got to talk. We got to communicate. We have to listen. What else? Don't be an accuser. I could elaborate on it, but you elaborate on it. Don't be an accuser. What do you mean?
Don't accuse things. Don't accuse people of things that you don't know whether or not they can.
Don't assume knowledge you don't have.
Right.
You know, that's a lesson probably for all of us, or at least most of us. It takes humility to realize that there are things we don't know. Right? Don't assume things you don't know. Well, that's important. If we want to have good relationships with people, we have to be careful we don't make assumptions. What else? Share.
Don't talk about people behind their back.
Don't gossip. Don't talk about people behind their back. What else? Don't be judgmental.
We're the temple of God, and we've got to not attack ourselves and stuff, and say, we've got to think highly of ourselves because God thinks highly of us.
Okay, so we've got to have a proper self-esteem so that we don't bring other people down, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times that's what happens, right? I think badly of myself, so I'm going to pull somebody else down. Yeah. What else?
Be empathetic.
Empathetic. Put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? That's empathy. Compassionate. In one word, if you were to boil all this down in one word, what would that one word be to develop in relationships? Love.
Love for yourself and love for others.
Love for others and love yourself. Love.
To put others before ourselves.
Yes, Jesus first, others second, yourself last. J-O-Y, and that's how you spell joy. Right? So, if you love others but you don't get love back, can anything good come out of that? In what way?
Maybe other people will see that you love.
Okay, so I'm person A, I love person B. Person B doesn't respond like they should, but person C sees that, right? And they learn something. Okay, good. Anything else that could come positive out of not receiving love back? I've only got one brain, so I've got three. Penny?
Well, we're storing up riches in heaven, right? God sees it.
Okay. Okay, so person C is at least God, right? So God sees everything. And one of the points that I'm going to make in my sermon Sunday morning, which is a lavish offering where Mary anoints Jesus' head with this $55,000 a bottle of perfume. I'll explain that Sunday morning. One of the points I'm going to draw out of that lesson is everything we do, God sees, and God will reward. Colossians 3, 22 through 24, and Matthew 10, 42 through 44, 40 through 42. God sees everything and He rewards our efforts. Somebody else over here? The question is, what can we get back even if we love and don't receive love in return?
Well, I feel, at least for me, the more I give to others, the more I get in return, and it's in every such way. And, you know,
Who is it that first said it is more blessed to give than to receive? Who said that? Jesus did. Most of the time He knows what He's talking about. Did you have something over here?
Don't stop. If you get a negative report, feedback will still use positive.
Yeah, if we don't give love back, we still give, right? We still give love, still show love, Donna.
It can develop a closer relationship with God because we have to depend on Him when we're not getting what we need.
So if we're not getting what we need to receive from others, we can learn to depend on God. All right.
God helps those who help themselves. I don't know if it's in the Bible, but it should be.
If it's not in the Bible, it ought to be. If it's not there, we'll rewrite it and we'll add it. God helps those who help themselves. I think that's a biblical principle. Yeah, it's not in those words. That's not even one of the Proverbs, but I think the principle is taught. So do we have the power to improve most relationships with most people? Yes. One person can be a big influence. We have the power to improve relationships. Turn to Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 10. Somebody read that. Galatians 6, 7 through 10. You got it, Mark?
Yep. Do not be deceived. God will not be made a fool, for a person will reap what he sows. Because the person who sows to his own flesh will reap corruption from the flesh. But the one who sows to the Spirit will reap eternal life from the Spirit. So we must not grow weary in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not give up. So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who belong to the family of faith.
So, if we sow to the Spirit, we'll reap from the Spirit. If we sow to the flesh, we'll reap from the flesh. When we're talking about relationships, we're going to get back, generally speaking, what we sow. If we want a listening ear, what do we need to give? We need to plant a listening ear. If we want an attentive spouse, what do we need to sow? Attentiveness. Galatians 6, 7 through 10. Albert Einstein, according to the Google, is the one who said insanity is doing the same thing but expecting different results. So if I'm having a bad relationship with somebody, can I change them? No. Can I change myself? If I change myself, am I going to change how they respond to me? Probably. If I had Marvin come up here, I won't ask you to do this, Marvin. If I had Marvin come up here and he stood on this side facing me and we were leaning up against each other, okay? We had our hands over against each other, okay? Marvin's a bigger guy than I am, and I may not be able to push him over, right? But what can I do? Back out of the way. Now, if he's putting all of his weight on my hands, what's going to happen to Marvin? Probably fall over. Okay? So I can't push him over, but if I step out of the way, I'm going to make him change his behavior. Otherwise, he's going to fall. So if I'm butting heads with somebody at work or spouse or whoever it is, if I keep giving them, if I keep sowing the same seeds in their lives, I'm going to keep getting the same reaction back, and Albert Einstein says that's nuts. If I want to change their behavior, what do I need to do? Change my behavior. Whatever I'm doing that's causing them to react negatively, I need to change that behavior, and I'm going to get them to change. Romans 12:17. Donna? Soft answer turns away wrath. Who said that? Solomon. Where? That's as close as I can get. It's in Proverbs somewhere. You could Google it. Soft answer turns away wrath, and it'll tell you what proverb it is. Romans 12, verse 17. Somebody read that verse for us.
Repay no one evil for evil, and regard for good things in the sight of all men.
So in the world in which we live, if I'm talking about somebody that I work with, if they are giving me evil and I repay evil to them, what are they going to give back? More evil. Okay, so then I give them more evil. Then what are they going to do? Give back more evil. Okay, so we got tit for tat going on and on and on. Paul says, change the cycle. Don't be crazy. Return good for evil, or in the words of Solomon, a soft answer turns away wrath. So let's go to this question. Rachel?
I was studying Proverbs, and there, in my study book, it's broken up into topics, which is very helpful because a lot of times they're all mixed up in the chapters, they're just different topics. But now I'm reading it, so it's talking about foolishness and, fool, his folly, his mouth is loose and that sort of thing. So it's really showing being wise and using discretion and the differences in those things. And that's just
Yeah, Solomon gives us a lot of wisdom in Proverbs about how to use our mouths, right? How to communicate.
You need a verse 18.
Okay, read Romans 12:18 as well.
If possible, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men.
If possible, as much as it lies within you. See, Paul recognizes we can't change the other person, but we can change ourselves. Live at peace with all men. Which means I don't have to give tit for tat, do I? I can give a soft answer, or I can walk away from the controversy or whatever. So, how about sowing seeds in our marriages? Let's talk about our marriages. Okay, I'm getting to that. Can I change my spouse? Can I change my spouse? By what you're doing, you can influence them, but you can't force them to change, can you? Who can I change? I can change myself. I can change my attitude. I can change the words I use. I can change my behavior. I am in almost complete control of myself. Or I should be. Right? We human beings have the ability to control ourselves. So when we're talking about our spouse, and if they've got behaviors that need to change, that ought to change, then we should look for constructive changes that we can make in our own thinking and our own behavior that would, and to use the word Mark used, influence them to change their behavior. You don't have to answer this question, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but have you ever negotiated with your spouse?
About changing diapers, absolutely.
Well, tell me about it. You opened it up.
We had a bargaining system.
Uh-huh.
We would rotate who had the dirty diaper,
Yeah.
and it was used as a bargain. You do it this time, I'll do the next two.
Okay.
You use it as a bargaining chip.
Okay. So you're like, my stomach's a little queasy. I'll pass on this one.
No, this one's a little right. It was always great to go over to the in-laws.
Okay.
I'll do the diaper.
Okay. So, you can change your own behavior, and then you can influence, negotiate, discuss, talk to, or whatever, your spouse.
How you feel, because I've worked at a couple daycare centers, and I changed some diapers too.
Yeah. Did you have anybody there that you could negotiate with so they would change diapers? Nobody wanted to negotiate, huh?
I guess
It-
as this is talking about the spouse, but I guess especially with younger ones, don't pick a spouse thinking you're going to change it.
There is a saying, the altar, marriage altar, doesn't alter anything, and the rites don't write anything. So we can't marry somebody expecting to change them, right? That's a bad plan. Bad plan. All right, what kind of plant does the seed of nagging produce? You know what? I might open up a can of worms, and we men are outnumbered, but I'm looking for an image on Google, okay? You know where I'm headed with this? I type in nagging, and all these images come up. Every single, I'm not joking, every single one of them was the woman nagging the man.
Well, if he would just get up and do it, there wouldn't be a problem.
You better be careful.
She chose tonight to be in my class. I don't know if she saw my notes or what. What does planting the seed of nagging produce? More nagging? What? Selective hearing.
Anger.
Anger.
Well, I think
Hurt
it's
feelings.
interesting.
Hurt feelings.
The proverb that deals with continual dripping, doesn't it refer to the woman being, yes, the contentious woman, okay. I was gonna say, it is, so it's maybe that there's,
I wasn't planning on elaborating on this. Proverbs 21:9, better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. And Proverbs 27:15 and 16, a continual dripping on a very rainy day and a contentious woman are alike. Whoever restrains her restrains the wind and grasps oil with his right hand. Can you restrain the wind? Can you hold oil in your hands?
Oh, tiny little bit.
There's no end to a contentious woman. In other words, she's never going to be satisfied, and she's always going to be nagging. That's a character flaw that Solomon is talking about there. Here are some seeds, some plants that are produced when you plant nagging. Bitterness, withdrawal. Men will clam up, right? I mean, that's how men oftentimes respond to that kind of thing. Reprisal. You're nagging me, I'm going to get you back. It's not going to be nagging when I get you back, but it'll be something. Sharp words or sarcasm or something. Or resentment. And this is just a smattering. Ma'am?
I think all of those.
All of them. So if we're wanting to change the behavior, we've got to be careful what kind of seed we're planting. Is nagging productive? No. It's not productive because you're going to get the wrong kind of plant. Jessica, you had something?
Well, I just think, as much as, Job went through, I know in the end he gets everything back and more, but he would never curse God, and he endured it, I mean, it just makes you think everything he went through, if he doesn't curse God, how we can't do the same, we can't either.
Okay, so we're talking about changing other people's behavior, Jessica, and you bring up Job. And Job had these four friends when Elihu steps into the picture, and they said everything wrong, right? They may have been good friends, but they're bad counselors.
Yeah, they weren't very nice.
Now, what did Job do for them in the end?
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, you haven't read the end of the story yet? Who's read the end of the story? What does Job do for his friends in the end? He offers sacrifices for them, and he prays to God on their behalf. These friends that have been attacking him for the last 30 chapters,
They weren't nice to him at all.
they weren't nice to him at all, and he goes to God on their behalf.
And then he gets,
There's a lesson in that.
gets more than he had before, I heard that.
Yes, God gives him twice as much as he had before, except kids. He gives him the same number of kids. And his wife too, yeah. Except she was smart enough to shut her mouth after she said that. All right, can y'all read this cartoon here? Or is that the words too little? Okay, Mo is the bully. Y'all are familiar with Calvin and Hobbes, right? Mo is the bully. And Mo tells Calvin that he needs to give him his money, and Calvin says, you better be nice to me. And Mo says, why? And Calvin says, because I'll pay in my taxes that pays your food when you're in jail. I'm summarizing. So then Mo socks him there. And then Calvin says there at the very end, he says, it's an unfortunate privilege that my lips move when I'm thinking. We get out of relationships oftentimes what we put into them. Calvin, in this example, Calvin put sarcasm into that relationship. And look what it got him. It got him a fat lip. We have to deal with people like Mo. I mean, there's always going to be bullies, right? There's always going to be bullies in the world. So what can we do to improve relationships? And we're thinking specifically about marriage relationships, but it's also obviously broader than that. Number one, sow strategically. Sow positive seeds. We're talking about strategically. That is, what do you want for your spouse? What do you want for them? I've got some examples up there on the screen. Growth, contentment, and joy. We want that for our spouse, right? Or for our friends, the people that are around us. Well, what do we want from them? What do we want out of them? Because in order for a relationship to work, my parents always said it takes two to tango, right? They usually said it in the context of me and my sister arguing and fighting. We're 13 months apart in age. She's 1 year, 1 month, 2 weeks, and 1 day older than I am. And we were constantly fussing and arguing. And my mom would say something like, it takes two to tango, it takes two to argue. What was her point? What was Mom trying to teach me?
Walk away.
Walk away. There's not going to be an argument if you don't fuel the fire, right? So what do we want out of our spouse? There are just some examples: respect, responsibility, affection, romance. So what are we doing to create the environment for that? What are we doing? What kind of seeds are we planting in the relationship to get the harvest that we desire? That's sowing strategically. Number two, sow charitably. Charity is old King James word, Gail. What does charity mean? Love. So sow lovingly. Are you stretching yourself to meet your spouse's needs? What did Jesus do in order to show his love for the world?
He died.
Are we dying for our spouse? Are we willing? Are we willing to live for our spouse? Sow charitably. What are we doing to get ourselves outside of our comfort zone in order to serve someone else? What does it mean to love in a practical sense? Answer that question. What does it mean to love in a practical sense?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
The important word that you used in that quotation is the verb to do. What do you do?
If you want your wife to love and appreciate you, I'm not married, I'm just saying you should love and appreciate them.
And show it through actions, right?
Yeah.
And words, but actions. And then number three, how do we improve our relationships? Patty said earlier that we need to listen. How do we develop relationship? We need to listen. Point number three, listen to love. If we don't listen well, and Rachel's in the class tonight, and I don't listen well to her sometimes, what do you communicate when you don't listen well?
Sometimes you don't care.
It shows that you don't care. Just not interested. What else? Shows a lack of respect.
I remember Clarence Floyd one time told us, he told us that, now we listened, he told us that sometimes he has to physically take the remote, turn the TV off, or put it on mute, and then listen. And I thought, that's so sweet.
Aww,
Did you ask him how frequently he does that?
that's sweet.
Somebody else over here said something?
It just shows that you don't respect what they are saying, what words they're trying to get across.
Yeah. You don't respect that, whatever they have to say. It's not important,
It's not credible.
not credible.
Even if
Doesn't interest you, Donna?
you don't agree, because you don't have the same kind of feelings, you don't really heart, you and Rachel.
Mhm.
It's not something, but you honor her, respect that is important to her, so you will do things with her, for her, to let her enjoy that.
Right.
Even though you're like, okay, is how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
But,
How much longer?
you know, we
Yeah.
do that for each other because
Right.
we respect and want them to be happy.
Right. So we listen to love. What are you doing to help your spouse be their best? And it's rhetorical, something to think about. What are we doing to help the other person be their best? What are we planting? What kind of seeds are we planting? What kind of environment are we creating around them in order to help them be their best? Appreciation, that's a big one, isn't it? It's one of a male's highest needs. Somebody over here?
Appreciate their talents and what they bring into the relationship.
Yeah. And not compare them to somebody they're not, right? Don't compare them to somebody they're not. Appreciate them for who they are. Positivity. Yeah. What does behavior have to do with sowing love? Turn to 1 John chapter 3.
What chapter?
1 John chapter 3. What does behavior have to do with showing love?
Love is an action.
Love is an action.
Entertaining, patient, kind. You have to do.
Yep. So 1 John chapter 3, somebody get there and somebody read verse 7, verse 10, and verse 18. Now, it'd be good if we read the whole chapter, but it'd be good if we read the whole Bible. So we'll just limit ourselves to these 3 verses.
Little children, let no one deceive you. Whoever practices righteousness is righteous, so he is righteous. Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning.
Okay, so whoever practices righteousness, notice the verb practices. That's behavior, right? Is putting into practice things that are right and good. All right? Next verse. Verse 10.
By this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother.
Okay, again, the emphasis there is on practicing what is good and what is right. And verse 18.
Little children, let us not love in word or thought, but in deed and in truth.
Let's not just talk about it. Let's do what?
Do it.
Do it. Let's show it. Put it into practice. So if we want to build positive relationships with our spouses, obviously with anybody, we're going to talk about children in just a moment, then we've got to think about what kind of seeds we're planting in order to get the harvest that we want. So many people just go through life and they don't think. I should put a period right there. They don't think. They don't think about their actions. They don't think about the repercussions. They don't think about what it's like to be in the other person's shoes and being the recipient of the words or the behavior or the actions or whatever. They just, like Kevin on Home Alone, where he runs through the house screaming like that. You know, I think some people just live their lives like that and don't stop to think. They're not using their brains. How about growing our children? Here are just a series of principles that we want to put into application with our children. Envision what we want them to be. Now, almost everybody in here has already raised their kids. Unfortunately, we don't have the parents in here that still are influencing their kids. Maybe you're watching online. We need to envision what we want our kids to be. We're not raising children, we're raising adults. What do we want our children to be when they're adults? Because that informs our vision and how we treat them. When they're 5 years old, what kind of 25-year-old do we want them to become? Now, we got to be patient, not expect them to act that way when they're 5. But we're creating the environment when they're 5 so that they'll have the skills and the knowledge, the foundation to become a productive 25-year-old. Number 2, we need to be intentional. Good kids don't happen by accident. Good kids don't raise themselves either, do they? Because kids don't discipline themselves.
No, you gotta discipline them.
That's why mom and dad have a role to play. We have to discipline them. We've got to train them. That includes positive reinforcements and includes negative reinforcements. Takes both of them. Number 3, we have to be tactical. All kids are not the same, are they? All boys are not the same. I was not the typical rambunctious boy. All boys are not the same. All girls are not the same. Now, Jill and Anna are quite a bit alike, but in some important ways they're different. So we have to be tactical. Number 4, we have to anticipate. We have positive expectations, and we anticipate them making a mistake. Because our kids aren't perfect, are they? They're going to make some decisions that probably aren't good. And we just have to let them make the mistakes, right? We got to let them make the mistakes. And suffer the consequences. Now, there's a lot of parents that don't let a 5-year-old suffer the consequences. So by the time they become 25, they don't think there's any consequences. They do what they want to do, and society has to adjust to them. And mom and dad are partly at fault because that's the way they raised them when they were 5. But we have to let them suffer the consequences. And number 6, we have to model. If we want to train our kids to be responsible with money, what do we have to do? We got to be responsible with money. We have to model in front of them. We can't say, do as I say and not as I do. Are they going to learn from our words more or from our actions more? They're going to learn from our actions more. The words support the actions, not the actions, the words. What they see is what's going to influence them more, because our behavior is more long-term. For example, we can talk about church being important all day long, but if we don't go to church, the talk is pointless.
So if you read your Bible, you don't teach them the Bible, they're not going to respect the Bible.
Right. So we've got to teach them, and then we've got to show it. The two of them go together. All right, then the other list, which is a bunch of E's, which you know right off the bat that I got this from somebody else because I don't alliterate. Education, example, experience, and encouragement. Another list of virtues that we need to put into practice with raising our kids. Again, what kind of seed are we sowing in our kids' lives? What kind of plants are we wanting to reap? What kind of harvest are we wanting to reap? Let's talk about growing friendships, a little broader discussion. What's the foundation of a healthy friendship?
Love.
Respect. Love is the foundation for respect.
And respect has to be taught, and it's not being taught anymore.
Respect is not being taught. Going back to appreciating the other person. In order for a friendship to be healthy, we need to contribute something to the other person, right? We need to contribute something to the other person. It might be happiness, it might be support, it could be any number of things that we provide the friendship. Does this friendship, and so when we're thinking about friendships, we ask ourselves, does this friendship bring out the best in me? Aren't these kind of questions that we kind of ask our kids as they're growing up, as you're looking for friendships or developing friendships? Does this friendship bring out the best in me? How many times have I counseled young women who are in a potential marriage relationship, and they say, this guy brings out the worst in me?
That's not good.
The first time that thought went through her mind should have been the last time she thought about him. You know, there's just some relationships, there's just some people who are toxic, and it's because they were not raised to respect other people. And so this young man or this young woman should not get in a relationship with them, because marriage doesn't change things. And so if he's disrespectful before the marriage, he's going to be disrespectful after the marriage. So get out of that relationship. Don't say I do, because he won't. Question number 2. Will this relationship make me stronger or more spiritual? I want to encourage our teenagers here at Swartz Creek to marry a Christian. Marry somebody that's going to help you get to heaven. That's the core purpose of a marriage. Help you get to heaven. Now, there are spouses who just aren't interested in church, but they encourage their spouse to go. That's the best of a bad situation, but it's good that they encourage.
People that aren't married have to encourage themselves.
And they have to encourage themselves. Yeah, in that kind of situation. Penny?
Well, I was going to say, we've known people who are married to people like that, and most of the time that doesn't make any difference with the kids, though.
Yes. Because the kids tend to follow the parent that doesn't go to church. They tend to do that. Okay,
It's because kids like that are raised in a relationship, they're in and out.
Mm-hmm.
There's the outside and there's the inside. And, those are going to split off all the time.
Yeah, so they go to church one Sunday, they don't go to church the next, they go to church, they don't go to church, and so it's,
Even seeing the example,
yeah, yeah.
they may choose a path that
There's no continuity there, there's not a foundation being built there. Does this friendship encourage and empower me? Is it helpful for me? Or is it pulling me down? And is this friendship challenging and stretching me? So we need to sow seeds of friendship. We're running out of time. But Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 24, if a man would have friends, he must first what? Be one. Show himself friendly. And so to have a good friendship, here are 3 characteristics, 3 qualities that we need to have in order to have good friendships. You could make a list as well. We need to be honest. Friends need to be honest with each other, right? We need to be honest. Curiosity. What do I mean by curiosity? There are times when Rachel and I go to visit people and they never ask Rachel and me any questions about ourselves. People who just talk about themselves. Now, what if you're visiting with somebody and they never ask you any questions about what's going on with you, what does that communicate?
Being selfish, really.
they don't want to know.
They don't care about you.
They're not curious, right? They don't care.
Only care about themselves, I would say.
Well, if they're only talking about themselves.
That's all they're caring about, I'm saying.
No, I'm not trying to judge their motives. I'm just saying that's how it appears.
Yeah.
Okay? So good friendship is going to be curious. What's going on with you in your life? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your fears? That's friendship. That's getting outside of the superficial. What's your favorite color? That's superficial.
Friendship is 2 ways. It can't just be about you.
Yes.
Be about the other.
It's 2 ways. And then number 3 is loyalty. Being loyal to that relationship. So if you mess up, if you hurt my feelings or whatever, you make me mad, if I'm loyal to the relationship, I'm going to stick with it, right? I'll come back and say, hey, you upset me when you said that. And then we're going to work it out. We're going to communicate, which is what Betty said way back 45 minutes ago. And we're going to preserve the relationship. So honesty, curiosity, and loyalty.
Loyalty would be you don't share with others confidence.
That's another characteristic of this loyalty. Donna said that you don't share with others something that your friend has shared with you, right? You don't publish it on Facebook. That's loyalty. That's right. Good point. Last major point here is the seed of presence. Because if you really want to develop a friendship, what do you have to do? You got to be there. You got to be there. You got to be present. You got to be attentive. You got to invest. You got to make yourself available. You think about David and Jonathan. They are mentioned, I believe the first time they are mentioned as friends is in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and then Jonathan gets killed in 1 Samuel chapter 31. So that's, 13 chapters, 14 chapters? David and Jonathan, David and Jonathan, David and Jonathan, spending time together. Paul and Timothy, spending time together. There are two things that are said that Aquila and Priscilla did together. What are those two things? They studied with Apollos together, and maybe. Okay, there's three things they did together. They had a house church. Romans chapter 16. You probably didn't think of that. But the other one that you're going to say, oh yeah, they were tent makers. Paul worked with them, right? So Aquila and Priscilla were together in a business. It was Aquila and Priscilla Tent Making Company. And then they also were Bible teachers. They taught Apollos. And then also they had a house. They were wealthy, apparently, had enough money to have a house where they could have a church meeting there. So they spent time together. If you want to develop a relationship, you got to spend time together. Which is why fellowship in the church is so important. Fellowship not just in the building, and that coffee donut period of fellowship time is really good for us because it allows us to spend time together, but it's also fellowship outside of the church building. It was really good for Patty and Lynn and Marvin and me and Rachel to travel down together to the Creation Museum. We spent 6 hours together in the car. Marvin got us down there and back safely. So that makes me have more confidence in Marvin's driving ability. See? Just spending time together. So the ultimate test of a relationship, are we contributing value to each other? God created these earthly relationships from the beginning to help us get to heaven. To help form us into the image of Christ. And we need those relationships to help us. So are people changed for the better because of our contagious smile or our words of encouragement or our comforting presence? That's the kind of seeds that we're sowing in order to harvest relationships that are good and healthy and positive. So we always conclude in this study with a seed to sow and a weed to uproot. The seed is hope. The weed to uproot is the opposite of hope, which is despair. Giving up. And so we want to have a prayer to help us this week to be more upbeat and less downcast. Boy, this COVID thing has been draining, hasn't it? I'd pull my hair out if I had any. It's just so, and it just goes on and on and on. It's like a bad winter. Just goes on and on and on. Jessica?
One thing I'm realizing today, I have with my caseworker, I didn't show very much love for myself. And if I want to love others, I first got to stop putting myself down and loving myself and treating myself with respect, or I can't respect others.
That's right.
So I got to work on that.
That's right.
From you guys.
All right, let's end our class with a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are thankful that we could spend some time tonight encouraging each other and talking about your word and its application in our lives. Please help us, Father, to be hopeful, to continue looking for the light at the end of the tunnel and the rainbow behind the cloud, because we know that you are always there and you are always present in our lives. Help us, Father, to uproot discouragement and pessimism and despair out of our lives because it illustrates a lack of faith. It illustrates that we're focusing on the here and now, that we're focusing on our own limited abilities and our own limited power rather than your unlimited power. So we ask that you will forgive us for that and help us, Father, to uproot that. Give us a good week, Father. Bless us with a good weekend when we come back together to spend time in worship and fellowship. Again, Father, we ask your blessings on those of our congregation who are sick. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.